Okay, really sad story broke over the weekend. So an MP was killed while going about their business, doing what MPs in Britain do every week, which is meet with and talk to their constituents and hold surgeries where very often you don't need a pre-booked appointment. You can turn up and you can go and talk to your elected representative. I think that's a very important thing in a democracy. And Sir David Amess, Tory MP, was killed in the process of doing so by being stabbed. Now, obviously, above all else, this is a really tragic thing. It doesn't particularly matter what label was by the name of this individual. This was someone taking part in basically one of the cornerstones of our democratic process, and they were killed. The main damage from this is the damage it does to democracy overall, the health of the democratic space in society, the room for debate, the room for discussion. Now, these are things that the left has always cared about, should always care about. This doesn't mean we need to get sucked into this narrative about civility and how, it's so uncouth when people who are vulnerable express themselves in a way we deem aggressive, or you can never talk ill of your political opponents, even when they're causing untold harm to working class people. No, you don't need to be sucked into any of that to acknowledge that if people are being threatened with their lives, this is a threat to democracy overall. This is an injury has been done to the health of the democratic process, and to society, and to British society, and to the relationship between elected representatives and their constituents. So no rose-tinted glasses, right? This was a Tory MP, tragic death. We can go through the voting record, and absolutely, as with any Tory MP, the policies inflicted by Tory MPs will have caused untold harm to vulnerable people up and down this country. That means nothing in this case. This is someone who was part of the democratic process who was murdered. It was a premeditated murder, and it was an attack on the principle of democracy itself. Again, you can argue we don't have a very good democracy in this country. You could argue we don't have a definitional democracy in this country. However, one of the things we do have are those surgeries where constituents really can take their MPs to task, can talk to their MPs. That is something vital. That is something that we're at risk of losing now. So rest in peace, Sir David Amess. It shouldn't happen to anyone in a healthy democratic society where there can be vibrant debate, campaigning, disagreement. Now, let's look at the real threats facing people in Britain. The real threats facing people in Britain are not some sort of wave of Islamic terrorism. This is where we've seen a lot of the far right have gone onto this. Every time a tragedy happens, you see a really sickening latching onto what is an undeniable tragedy that everyone could agree is a tragedy, trying to turn it into an issue about immigration, about refugees, about Muslims, right? It obviously goes without saying that any act committed in the name of Islam that is like this is not representative of Islam. It's not Islam, it's a perversion of a peaceful religion. But beyond that, and we don't know the details about this, I'm not going to get into the details, but we've all seen the speculation, what has or hasn't been said. The issue here is twofold. It's an issue of disillusionment in society, and it is an issue of rising discontent with British democracy. British democracy hasn't been delivering for people. People are getting angry. That doesn't justify this in any way. In fact, it does quite the opposite. It means in order to safeguard the democratic process, we have to see it open up, not close off more. Closing off more is exactly the wrong thing to do here. And looking further from that, we know the big threat on the rise is the far right, white nationalism in this country. That's where the majority, the bulk of the threat is. We also see we've got violent misogyny, things like the incel movement. We've obviously got, as could be the case here, we're not sure, we've got basically Islamic terrorism, if you like, that brand of extremism. And the most crucial thing to realise here is that all these things stem from an isolated society that creates vulnerable individuals. The response to this is not dog whistle racism. Anyone that is making this about that is shamelessly manipulating a tragedy for basically racist aims. The real worry here is that we fail to look at the real threats of rising lack of faith in democracy, increased isolation, leading to people of all these different sort of strains of extremism turning to violence and being sucked into that, mainly by the internet, mainly by disillusionment and radicalisation, be it Islamic terrorism, be it the incel movement, be it the far right. Again, arguably, almost definitely the biggest threat right now to elected representative safety in this country. It's on the rise. If we fall into racism and we make this, something about we're letting people into this country that shouldn't be here, and absolute racist nonsense like this, we fail to grasp the actual issue at hand here. Again, the issue isn't going to be fixed with more police. It's not going to be fixed with no more social media anonymity. It's not going to be fixed with more security. The only way this will be fixed is by a wholesale attempt to reinvigorate the democratic process and re-include the disenfranchised into the political process. That is the only way to address what caused this and hopefully mitigate or prevent anything like this ever happening again to an elected representative in this country. The moral high ground being taken, it is right. We do need to look at, we've seen a turn in recent years, particularly around Brexit, particularly around the violent demonisation of Jeremy Corbyn when he was Labour leader, particularly around the attacks on women especially. We've seen all this, right? The Brexit culture war. We've seen civility go. Now, civility isn't a neutral thing, right? Where's the civility if you're being materially brutalised by the British state? However, the moral high ground being taken by certain newspapers, columnists, individuals is shameless, right? You've got people who had headlines who in their papers, who called people scumbags, all these different things, now taking the moral high ground about people not liking the Tories, for instance. And this attack had nothing to do with David Amess being a Tory MP, but you have people now going, well, this is all because of what Angela Rayner said at the Fringe event, when these are the people that called Jeremy Corbyn a violent, dangerous threat to our way of life, apologists for terror, weak on jihadis, all these really dangerous strands of rhetoric, surrender bill, traitors, enemies of the people, right? Front page of newspapers that these people printed. And if you go back to these people, you've got people calling Labour supporters scum. You had a Tory MP go back on their Twitter feed who was now sort of talking all up, this is all about civility, and it is all about civility. However, you've got this person who said if you vote Labour now, you are racist, Jeremy Corbyn is scum, all this sort of stuff. Now, where I sit, that doesn't sound like the sort of people who should take the moral high ground. So to those newspaper columnists, to those MPs, you know who you are, who are saying these things but have actually contributed massively. And it's not on one side. This happens everywhere. And people go too far on all sides. However, the people who are now trying to take the moral high ground and make this about a way of either being bigoted towards Muslims or attacking the left, or just racist in general, you're not worth our time. You are trivialising something in such a shameless way, you show how little you care about it. Now, with security, should there be security guards when MPs do their surgeries? Because I absolutely think we need to keep surgeries with no appointments, right? Because you can deny someone an appointment. The one good thing about our system, much better than in America, is that you can arrange to see your elected representative. You can turn up, you can see them, and you can participate in a cornerstone of democracy in that sense. Now, keep that. That's basically the one good democratic participatory bit of our democracy. More, not less of that, please. Should there be security guarding an MP or something like that? Well, it's tricky because I believe it was Diane Abbott who said it. I'm not sure. It does make MPs who may need to meet with people who are vulnerable, people who are on the margins of society. It does make them appear more like agents of the British state rather than actors in a democracy to represent the people to the British state. Now, and go against the British state if necessary. Now, that isn't a good look. That's fine if you're rich, white, and want to talk about planning concerns. It's not fine if you are vulnerable, maybe you're of an ethnic minority, or you're poor, you have a terrible experience with authority and agents of the British state, and you're turning to an MP because of a relationship of trust, because you believe they will represent your interests. Now, that's not going to fly with a whole lot of people. That's the worry here, because of the history of these sort of things. It's going to make a lot of people feel basically like, why should they? Why should they bother going to an MP if it's sort of all guarded and you need to do appointments, jump through these hoops, all this sort of thing. Maybe there is there is just a risk that people have to take, but and I think it's tragic that there is a risk to being an MP now. However, and by the way, people should be robustly held to account for the damage and the pain they inflict upon working class people through policies they support or positions they take. That's fine, that's robust. People should be challenged. They should not be threatened with violence, because in the end, who is that going to rebound on above all else? Just have a think about it. If anyone on the left is sort of suspicious of what I'm saying, who's it going to rebound on above all else? The people who are having the most threats towards them, right? People like Diane Abbott. These are people on the left. These are ethnic minorities. These are the people that are going to get the big brunt of this, right? You can't go, oh, it's fine on this side, it's not gone on the other. No. It damages and is corrosive to the democratic process wherever it happens. And I'm speaking as someone who is absolutely, very vociferous in my aggressive critique of the Conservative Party and my complete lack of interest in the sort of West Wing type, oh, let's all just get along, when people are harming working class people through what they do. Most of the policies Tory MPs vote for, and many Labour MPs, are utterly unforgivable, utterly morally reprehensible. It doesn't mean we should go around stabbing elected representatives, because in the end, that's going to make it even harder to create a better world. Now, there has to be something has to change. Maybe it is security. The most important thing is preserving those surgeries. But again, I have concerns. But you have to realise, particularly when you're dealing with women MPs, particularly when you're dealing with MPs who are particular targets, they're saying they feel like they're in danger. So something has to be done, right, to respond to those concerns. Very worrying reports of various police forces basically not being bothered or trivialising the issue. That really does have to stop. And finally, my final point on this matter, the incessant focus on social media over the past couple of days is really pointless. Really misses the mark, really misses what we need to be thinking about, what we need to be talking about. Because the reality is, social media anonymity, most of the incitement to these things comes from newspaper columnists, from public figures. Anonymity on social media, you take that away, you're again shining a spotlight on vulnerable people that may feel a need to be anonymous, and you are using the state to police the public common, if you like, even further. The talk about social media anonymity, and this is all social media's fault, absolutely wrong. Everything that's happening on social media is a reflection of the corrosive, corroded society and civil society we're living in. It is not because of social media. Social media is how it is because of the corroded public sphere and the disillusionment with our democratic process. So I think people reaching for that for a quick fix are really, in my view, missing the mark. With that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for listening today. I'll be back at the same time tomorrow with some more musings on British politics. My name's been Toby Lepati-Mesme. Good night.